over 125 deals in 9 different states before the age of 28.
Welcome to Real Estate Investing Secrets. We're all looking for freedom and the opportunity to live better, more fulfilling lives. But most of us were trained our entire lives to work for someone else and chase their dreams. How can we use real estate investing as a vehicle to achieve financial freedom? My life is dedicated to answering your real estate investing questions and helping you build an investing business that allows you to change your life and the world around you, and to enable you to turn your dreams of financial freedom into a reality. My name is Mike Hambright from FlipNerd.com, and your questions get answered here on the Real Estate Investing Secrets Show.
Hey, Greg, excited to see you on the show today.
Dylan, thanks for having me, buddy. Always a pleasure to be a guest.
Of course, man. Listen, I am excited to be on the show with you. You're one of my favorite people in real estate investing. We met probably 4 or 5, maybe 5 years ago now, I would say. And we were at an event together. I saw you having breakfast. I'm like, you know what? Let me go talk to this guy who I've seen on a few podcasts and was very famous at the age of 22 or 23. And, I dare say you're one of my favorite people, like I said, in real estate investing today.
Thank you, buddy. I appreciate it. I remember that we were in the hotel breakfast place in St. Louis. It was like raining out. And
yeah,
I think St. Louis is a shitty city, to be honest with you. I was excited to get out of there. I love the event, but that city was like, it was like I felt like I was in Beirut. So it was a good event, but the Midwest is interesting, to say the least, given where I live.
It was. Listen, it was by far the nicest place in all of St. Louis, I believe.
The hotel was gorgeous. It was a gorgeous hotel, but the city of St. Louis, I understand why rent is $800 a month. It makes sense.
Exactly.
You're from St. Louis. I don't give a shit.
We stay. Yeah. Listen, we still love you. So let me introduce the show. My name's Dylan Tanaka. I'm a hybrid investor agent. I'm from Metro Detroit. If you guys want to learn about me, there's a link to my site and show notes, but we're not here to talk about me today. We're here for the real estate investing secrets from the Flip Nerd Podcast Network. We've got over 1,500 previous video and audio podcasts. So if you're not already subscribed, make sure you subscribe, because you're going to hear a bunch of crazy, fun, and cool stuff from all of our guests, but especially here today with my favorite guest, Greg Helbeck. So Greg, let's talk about this really quick. So you're a full-time real estate investor, right? What is in your pipeline right now?
Like revenue or deals?
No, like what kind of deals are you working on right now?
Right now we have 10 wholesale deals currently going on. I got 3 or 4 flips. I'm just going off the cuff here. I can pull up a spreadsheet.
No, you don't need to.
One rental where I'm buying that I'm going to just take down and keep. Subject to property that is like in motion. It's not like sealed yet, but we have pretty much a mixed bag of assignments, flips, and then some rental properties. And then now with the market getting all squirrely, we're starting to do a little bit of this creative finance stuff. By the way, a lot harder than these gurus make it seem. I'm just being blunt with you. I got nothing to sell you. Like, that shit's hard. It works. I'm not saying it doesn't work. I don't want to be Debbie Downer, but if you want someone to sell you their house subject to, they got to be motivated. Anyway, so we got a little bit of that stuff going on. But our bread and butter is really, we do about 60% of our businesses. We're going to go try to wholesale it. The keyword there is try. And after we do that, we'll then go ahead and we'll take some of the big ones down, like the deals that don't need major work that we have big spreads on. I'll just buy them and I'll flip them, or I'll keep them as rentals. And I think it's important to be able to have many tools in your tool belt. If you're just a wholesaler, you're going to be in trouble. I'm sorry to say that, because there's some deals where you might not be able to get inside, or maybe the seller doesn't want you to assign it, or there's an opportunity to make money. But if you only have one tool in your tool belt, you should probably look into other exit strategies as well, just so you can make your marketing and sales efforts as efficient as possible.
Yeah, you've got a saying that you don't like the way that gurus smell, right? And I've got a saying you can't be a one-trick pony in this business. No. I don't want to brag, but I've been in the business a long time, unfortunately, as you can tell from the gray hair. And I've gone through a lot of markets. Right? They're talking about a shift right now, whatever's going on. But the reality is you've got to have multiple different ways that you can take down a property, approach a property, speak with the seller, talk to banks, talk to other agents, investors, brokers, whatever it is. And 100%. Like Greg said, being involved in all these different types of deals, that's the best way to learn that stuff. So why don't we unpack a little bit? We kind of foreshadowed in the beginning there, but why don't we unpack? You're younger. You're not as young as you used to be. None of us are. We talked about that earlier before we got on the show, but So what led you to real estate investing initially?
So yeah, as you said, I used to be like an actual young kid. Now I'm an adult with a beard who's almost 30 years old. So I'm a glorified adult now. But when I started, I did not look like this, and I certainly wasn't this age. So I was 20 years old. I was in college, and I had no idea what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to be successful, whatever that meant. I played hockey for a while, and I wanted to play in the pros. That didn't work out. So after that didn't work out, I was like, what am I going to do next? So I was 20, and no, it was 19 or 20. And I was living with my parents in mommy and daddy's basement. I had no overhead. And they said, you got to go to college, son. And I said, okay, sure. I didn't have great grades in high school, so I didn't really get into many colleges. I wasn't a deadbeat, but like I was getting like C pluses, B minuses, just kind of squeaking by. Anyway, so I went to community college and I enrolled in Rockland Community College, about 30 minutes outside of Manhattan. And I kind of felt like a loser, Dylan, because I was like living with my parents. All my friends were like at better colleges. On paper, I was broke. On the surface, didn't have nothing really going on for me. Like, Greg's in community college. He's figuring it out. My son is in, SUNY, whatever, and they're going to be an engineer, like whatever, accountant. So I kind of looked like a loser on paper. But during that time, I started reading books on like self-improvement, money, read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, read like this book called Elite Minds. I started learning about mindset, and I was like super young, and I like never ever was a guy who reading like books. So I started reading these books, and I realized like there was definitely like ways to be successful. And I started like dabbling in like stock trading, and like I, was into like the Wall Street thing for a while. Thought I wanted to be like a financial guy. Going through college while this is going on. So I started to actually get pretty good grades because I actually got my head out of my ass. And I started trying, and I got really good grades in college, like would get less of my perfect scores on my tests because I actually committed to it. Like in high school, I just screwed off. But in college, I was like, you know what? Like I'm actually going to like see if I can be a good student, and started getting really good grades, doing really well in school, taking the hard classes. I ended up transferring to a SUNY school, another legitimate college at that point, to get my 4-year degree. But I took the 4-year degree while I was living with my parents. I didn't want to get in student loan debt. That was my whole rub. I was like, I don't want to get in student loan debt. So if you're going to make me get a student, because my parents weren't rich. So I was like, if you're going to make me go take out student loans, I'm bailing from college, because their parents paid for their college. But back in the 80s, it was cheap. So I said, if I can go to this school for $3 or $4 grand and live at home and sacrifice, would you be open to paying for it? And obviously they have the money for that. So they said, sure. So while all that's happening,
listen, already a negotiator. I don't even know if you're
saying
you're 18.
Oh,
he's like 17. He's negotiating with his mom and dad.
Dude, I don't screw around because I did not want to get in debt like that. I knew that was the enemy. I knew that was public enemy number one. So anyway, while this was all happening, I went to a seminar on double closing wholesale deals. Like it was a free guru seminar in Newburgh, New York, at the Ramada, right off of 300. I know exactly where it is. I drive by it all the time. And this person was talking about how you can make money without any money, like get rich quick, basically. And I remember I was at the seminar. I looked behind me. I had my 2 friends with me. I said, I don't know what you idiots are going to do, but I'm going to sign up for this upsell. So they said it's $2,000. They said you could take somebody for free. So why don't we negotiate and see if we can get a 3-for-1 special? My one friend, Kevin, said, I'm not doing it. My friend, Devin, who's super successful now, said, I'll do it with you. So we went in 50-50, $1,000 each, went to this next like seminar, like 3 weeks later, about like more details or whatever. Then they tried to pitch us into all this other bullshit. I only did the first upsell for the $2 grand. But the point is, that got me started. That got me interested and motivated. And I remember at that seminar, Dylan, the first one I went to, I made the decision I was going to be a real estate investor and be extremely successful. That day in that freaking seminar room, like my decision was made, I was going to be successful. So after I got out into the wild, it was really hard. And I knew that it was going to work, but it was going to take time, and I need to put the effort in, and I need to understand if this was easy, everybody would do it. And then from then, I'll just kind of stop at this point. That was how I got into the game. But super young and naive, and had zero knowledge on anything at all, and no experience, and not a lot of credibility, and certainly not anything like it is now. So it was definitely difficult getting started, for sure. It was very, very, very difficult in New York too, out of all states, probably the hardest state to operate in. So that didn't help either.
I think what I'm hearing you say there is like, it all comes down to one thing, I believe anyways. And I know that you're very serious about this, and I want to get into some of your book stuff later. Yeah. But mindset to me is everything. Like you and I aren't going to be, we're not going to beat Jordan or Gretzky or whoever that person is, right? No. One-on-one, because no matter what our mindset is, but we can definitely beat the old Greg or the old Dylan from 5 minutes ago when we change our mindset. So Is there like a book or a program or a thought process that people who are listening or watching that you can tell them right here in the beginning, like when in the beginning stages, how do you get to that place where you can learn how to shift that mindset?
So there's a book that I would say is more of a practical book. It's called The Compound Effect. Darren Hardy wrote the book, and it basically just talks about small wins every day add up to big results. That's if you want to like read the book, or you can just listen to what I just said, it's going to get the same thing. Obviously, he covers more details in there, but he really talks about the little things you do every day for better or for worse. That's a big point there. Are going to show results in the future, but it's not going to be right away. Like if you have a bad habit of eating fucking shitty food for 5 years, the first day you don't feel bad, you don't look any different, but then 5 years down the road, you did the wrong thing for freaking, what's that, 60 months in a row, you're going to be fat as shit, right? But on the opposite side of the spectrum, if you drink a gallon of water a day and you want to lose weight or whatever, because it's going to supplement you eating shitty food, the first 2 weeks, you're going to be like, I look the same. Like I look completely the same. You know, I feel a little bit better, but I just look the same. If you compound that activity for 60 months, you're going to look like a lot better than you probably do now. So I knew that I had to be willing to invest my time at the time, because really I didn't have any money. So invest my time today to 1, 2, 3, 4 years down the road, have that start to pay off. Right. And I remember I would see all these like people being like, oh, I did my first deal. Oh, I made money in real estate. And at the time I didn't. So like, I would kind of believe it was true from other people, but I didn't have any track record myself. Right. So I kind of kept the belief going, like that flame going. But then once I did my first deal, I like kind of connected the dots, and then I knew that it was just a matter of time until I got some momentum and I was able to like actually grow a real business and make some real money.
Yeah. So having that mindset is super important.
Yeah.
When did you go from just having the mindset and thinking that you're going to do this to really like getting out there and networking and what do you think networking means to like a business like ours today?
It means well over $1.5 million in cash in my pocket. And I'm saying that as a crazy statement because it's true. So here's a good story. Up until 2018, I was making, I don't know, maybe 100 grand, like probably not, barely even making, like scratching the surface of 6 figures, just get inching my way there. Right. And this is like 2.5 years after I started. Right. So like, it's still like needed to, keep getting better. But I went to Investor Fuel. Ironically, I went to Investor Fuel and I met this guy at the event, and he was living in Dallas. His name's Jason. And I said, hey man, I'm going to start doing some marketing here in Texas because New York sucks. And I'd love to work with you and we can make some money together. And he was like, yeah, man, that sounds like a plan. And like 2 weeks later, I called him. We did a house, made 15 grand. And then a week later, I called him and did another one, made 30 grand. We probably did, oh my God, 35, 40 deals together, like where we both made it. And then every time, like the deals kept getting bigger and better. Then we started saving and buying cash and flipping. But like that one relationship, right, was a 7-figure relationship, right, that catapulted me to get to the next level, to be able to have the reserves and the business and the experience from one relationship, from one event, right? So listen, was it a good idea to go to Fuel? Of course it was. However, if you don't put yourself in an environment with people who are successful, your family and friends, unless they're entrepreneurs or salespeople, are going to be like, dude, you're fucking crazy. Like, why are you trying to go out and like get this house for like 50 cents on the dollar? Nobody's ever going to do that. The banks are greedy. Like, this is a scam. Like you got to get yourself in an environment where people are doing what you want to do, and you got to find a way to provide value to them. Right. And that's not that hard to do, because if you can share information that's practical, that's how you define adding value. Like I hear a lot of people always like, oh dude, how do I add value? If you share information that is applicable, that someone can listen to and then act on, you are providing value, right? That is the definition of providing value. So you have to get yourself in a situation where maybe you got to pay to be in that room. Maybe you earn your way in that room because you're, sought after, but you have to hang out with people who are doing what you want to do. Because what do they say? A rising tide lifts all ships. Mm-hmm. And if you're used to hanging out with your knucklehead buddies in high school who are picking their belly button lint and they're like crapping on you and your goals, it's just like walking through mud to try to get to the same destination. Like you can get there, but it's just going to take a lot longer versus taking the bridge across the damn street,
Yeah, for sure. And I remember, so when I came to Fuel, you and I had already known each other. We met at John's event. Yeah, I saw you there. And again, this is in 18. I don't remember what month, but whatever. It was sometime
probably
in
in the summer or something like that.
Yeah, and you and Jason, maybe it was August. You and Jason were doing deals, and like these guys were talking about, yeah. So and like everything's always like evolving, but fuel is a little bit different, right? And people are getting to know each other, and it was really like the sixth meeting. Now we're like 5-6 years in, so some people have been together for a long time. There's a good fraternity and sorority there, right? And they were like, yeah, this Greg guy, like he's doing deals with this Jason dude, and like Greg doesn't even live here, and like he's closing deals virtually, and I'm like, because I'd been in the biz, I don't know, 15 years. I'm like, virtually. I'm like, what are you talking about virtually? You know, like that was just like, especially being from the Midwest, being from Detroit, like that just wasn't a normal thing to see. Not to say you couldn't buy like a package of foreclosures in another state or whatever, but I'm like, how the heck is this thing working? So going back to mindset and being, I don't know if you're a true pioneer, but in my small circle, like you were one of the pioneers of virtual wholesaling or just doing virtual deals. So how are you able to overcome that? Versus the whole, I've got to just drive around my neighborhood and look for deals, with signs in the yard.
So that's a great question. So what ended up happening was before I started doing stuff virtually, I was living in New York and I was like basically tied to my location. Like I was in that market and I was living there. Right. So like for me to go see a house, I would get in a car, drive there, waste my time, probably get a no, and then go back home. So I realized that number one, New York was a problem because these attorneys were, and now it's not a problem because it's been doing it forever. But like at the time, it was a major problem, right? There was all these objections and deposits and all this bullshit. So I was like, basically, I had two choices. I could take this problem and I could try it somewhere else. And if I had the same problem in the other area, I was the idiot. But if I was right and it was easier in another state, then that was a good idea, right? And I give myself some credit. So I told myself, I said, I need to put myself in a situation where I can do what I'm best at, which is negotiating and making leads happen. Like I'm good at marketing and sales. That's what I've always worked on. I've been doing it since I started, right? I could do that from anywhere, right? I can get a list in any county, anywhere, at any time, and I can call it, right? So what I'll tell you step by step what I did, because I was big on earlier, I want to provide value. I got a list of people, and I realized from the few deals I've done in New York, the best deals were always vacant properties that are tax delinquent where the owners were dead, right? And I was like, oh my God, every good deal that I did was like kind of this scenario. Like it was a vacant property, they owed money and the owners were not alive, it was inherited. So I said, what if I can get a list of all these properties and just basically call those people? This is before any text services ever existed. This is before cold calling was popular. List stackers were not. I was doing my own list stacking before that was even a thing, just because I just tried to connect the dots the best I could. I'm certainly
It was all on Excel back then with a bunch of spreadsheets,
it was like
right?
Softwares and So I ended up taking a tax delinquent list in Dallas, and I took it and I ran it through this software called AccuZip. And what it did was it told me on that list, there was a certain percentage of these properties that were deemed vacant from the Postal Service. And then I was like, okay, so these are now there. So let's say the tax delinquent list had 5,000 names on it. Out of those 5,000 names, like 250 of those 5,000 were vacant tax delinquent properties, right? So then I would take that sub list and I would scrape it. And then I would take the people on that list and I would filter to see who was dead against the Social Security Death Index, right? Through a skip tracing service. So then I would know. So, and then out of those 250, we probably had like 60 that were like monsters. So when I would call people, I was calling the heirs of a property that was vacant, which usually means it needed work. They inherited the property and they owed money. So I was basically calling into a problem that someone didn't know how to solve. So, and I would do it all virtually. Like it didn't matter to me because I was like, well, if I'm in New York or California or Arizona, it doesn't matter. So I was calling these people, and most of the people were actually interested in selling because like they didn't even know they could sell it. So what we would do is my system was like, I would negotiate. I'd say, okay, you owe X in taxes. I can give you X amount of dollars on top of the taxes. Is that something you'd consider or probably not? And they usually would take the offers because it's like found money for them.
Yeah, it's free money. It's a windfall.
We would get these properties for like nothing. And then I would send Jason out there to like go confirm that it's not burned down. And he would go out there, he would walk the property, he would deal with all the bullshit that I hate dealing with. And then we would either close on them in cash together, because at that time I did it like 6 or 7 or 8 deals. I started saving some money. This is like $30,000 houses. We're not talking about Beverly Hills mansions. These are relatively cheap properties. Or we would wholesale them for massive assignment fees because I got them so cheap. And then he had all the buyers. So like once I got the deal, I had no involvement like whatsoever. I would split the deal, but I had zero involvement. It was once I got the property, it was like set it and forget it. I'd get a wire like 5 weeks later. So I started doing this like over and over and over and over and over again. And I was like, holy shit, like this is crazy. Like that idea of doing it in a different state actually works. And what happened, Dylan, and I'm kind of rambling here, but I'll just kind of tell you how this came full circle, is I realized after doing this for like a year and a half, there's only so many properties in any city, even in Dallas, that is a massive MSA, that are that distressed. So after about 18 months of doing this, I realized that there was only so many of these properties in this city of Dallas or in Fort Worth, the DFW area. And most of them were either in my CRM or they wouldn't answer the phone or whatever the case was. And I kind of knew that this window of opportunity was going to because I'd have to wait a couple of years for another lump sum of these distressed properties to, become vacant, et cetera. So I started to realize like, you know what? I mean, this is really working out well now, but I think I'm going to have to pivot because, there's only going to be so many of these houses. So at that point, made a good amount of money. And then I was able to move out of my house and move across the country and still do everything virtually. But I started actually reinvesting into like direct mail back in like New York, where I actually knew the area really well. And I, at the time, I had money at that point to spend, and I had a great team, boots on the ground. And we started building up our velocity business in New York. And that was back in 2018, 2019. Long story.
Yeah, no, it's good, man. I mean, it goes back to mindset too. So, you're God, unfortunately, like if I had a kid when I was 19, you're young enough to be my kid, which you're more mature than I am, and I want to keep it that way. But the reality is, like, I look at you and I'm like, all right, so Greg's a young guy. You were doing some, like, I don't know if you want to call it contract work with John Martinez, who was a famous sales trainer in our business, right? In our space.
That was a good idea too. That helped for sure.
Oh yeah, we can touch a little bit on that too. I'm not
Yeah,
trying to give John too much glory because he always gets a lot of glory from me, anyways. But so you were wise enough to get connected with John. However, you put that bear trap out, and he stepped in it, right? And then you're doing some stuff virtually. You're getting into masterminds. At that point, you were still a lot younger than you are now. I mean, especially percentage wise. Then you have kind of like the guts to like fly across country. You're from somewhat upstate New York. Do you call it upstate or just like you're outside
New York
of New York City?
It's in New York City subs. I mean, it's 45
You're still subs.
Man.
Yeah. So you're subs. You have sucky weather like I do, right? Your whole life. And you're like, screw this, man. I'm going to California. I'm going to go live in one of the most expensive zip codes in, pretty much, in the nation. And I'm going to flip houses virtually. And it's like, it's just a testament to mindset, but you saying, hey, I'm going to do this. And the baby steps, like you said, the compound effect, right? It's those small wins and the ways you prove to yourself, like, okay, I'm grown up enough to do this. Because there's a lot of guys, no offense to you, whatever they are, Zennials or whatever, you guys can't tie your shoes yet without your mom and dad helping you. And I hire some of those people, so I know what it's like. And Greg's like taking over, in your eyes and in my eyes, like you're taking over the world, doing things whoever thought you never thought you'd be doing.
Yeah, it's crazy.
7 years ago.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I mean, man, it came down to like, I wanted to win, bro. And I wanted to do whatever it takes to win. And like my version of winning might be different than someone else's version of winning. But I realized that once you have experience, and it takes time to get experience, you can shortcut that by joining groups and whatnot and getting coaches. But I was like, really, this is what I had a clear outcome at the time. It was, I want to move to California because all I knew, and I still love New York. I might eventually end up moving back there because it's where I'm from. But like at the time, I was like gunning to get out of there because it's all I knew. And I'm like, the only way I'm able to get to this objective of moving to California is if I'm able to geographically remove myself from any business activity. And I have to be able to do it on this computer here or on my phone. Because if I'm tied to my market, I can't move, right? Like if you own a plumbing business and you have to physically show up there to screw the pipes in, you got to have an employee or else you're not moving, right? So like, I was like, that had to happen. And in order for me to get there, I figured like a logical way to do it, even to combine it with like the problems I was having in the New York market earlier when I started, was like, if I could basically like get into a market that has nothing to do with my physical location, like Dallas, like I had no plans to ever move there. I was like, well, I can do business here and make money in Dallas. It doesn't matter where I live because it's like, I have no ties with Dallas whatsoever. So it was a smart idea, to kind of pick a neutral market like that. And it's crazy. I picked Dallas because that's like one of the most competitive markets in the country, but I didn't really know any better. I didn't really care. I was like, fuck it. I'm just going to, give it a shot. But like, it was just kind of like, let me test this out. And I think as an entrepreneur, a lesson that I've learned is you really never know if you're going to be right? You have to just test stuff, right? Like if you're not willing to test stuff, you're not going to know what works. So I tested this Dallas thing and it worked out. And Dylan, there's dozens of stuff I've tested that didn't work out, and that's okay. And that's normal. But yeah, I just was so clear on what I wanted to do at the time, which was move to California and have a virtual business. And when I first came up with that idea, it seemed like it was crazy. But looking back on it now, like what I was doing like 3 years ago, I would like laugh at like, oh my God, I get 1 deal a month, 2 deals a month. That's insane. Like we get that in a week now, because we've grown, right? Not because I'm special or, I've got some real estate spell. It's just, you just grow over time. And I always want to focus on growth. And like John Maxwell says, when you focus on growth, you just fall into the goals versus focusing on the goals and trying to like, jam a round peg into a square hole,
Yeah, no, exactly. And you and I have a friend, a similar friend, Michael Pinter, who
he's my uncle.
Man,
I got to do the DNA 23andMe thing. He might be related to me. Yeah.
He's a super great guy, and I always love spending time with him. But it's like he and I have talked about you, and this is going back a little ways. But he's like, how he talks. Like he's just to me, he's super New York, right? Because like we're just a lot different in Detroit than New York people.
Very different.
And he's just like this Greg guy. He's like he's really going to be something. He's going to do something. And he's like we got to start doing something together. I'm going to do a podcast with him. And you guys have been. This is years ago. He told me, and then I don't know if it's a regular thing.
Oh, it's a regular thing, dude.
I see you guys every week. Is it Monday
morning?
We're
hammering. We're doing a show. We have a lot of shows we produce. We still produce shows. One of my best friends. A lot of my best friends are in Long Island, which is hilarious. Maybe that's where I'll end up, but they're all in Long Island. But I mean, him and I, like, we connected, and thank you for the comment. We connected at a John seminar in San Diego, ironically. And he was like, I'm from New York. And I said, where are you from? He's like, oh, I'm from Nassau County. I'm like, oh, I'm from the Hudson Valley. It's like not that far away. And we just became good friends. And we've actually done deals together. Like Michael's had properties in my market where we've done deals and made money together, which is funny.
I didn't know that. That's cool.
Yeah. So like, he's became a good friend of mine. I think us New Yorkers are so different than everyone else, even though I might not live there full time now. It's just a different atmosphere and a different attitude. And even if I'm living in California for 6 months out of the year, which I do for tax purposes, but, like you can't take the New York out of a New York guy. Like, it's just like, it's in your blood almost. Maybe Detroit's the same way or Chicago or whatever, but I get along with the New York guys. Those are definitely my people.
Yeah, it's funny. The first few times I really ventured out, and probably in the last decade, not before, because I didn't pay as much of attention. But like I was talking to one guy, I'm like, "Where are you from?" And I'm like, "You're not from like the South or like the southern coast or like Florida." And he's like, "I'm from Chicago." I'm like, "Oh, no wonder I get along with you." I'm like, "We're kind of the same way," you know what I mean? And like we're a little bit meaner. We're a little bit quicker. We definitely speak faster. And like you told a story, I don't remember how it all went. I don't know if it was somebody in Texas or Oklahoma. And I think somebody was like, something about how fast you were talking or your New York accent or.
Oh yeah. They don't
something like that. No,
they're like feel uncomfortable because I'm a fast talk. Like we actually just lost a deal a couple weeks ago. My acquisitions guy was kind of doing like a post dead deal diagnosis. And, he was like, yeah, man, because he'll get the deal. And then if there's like legal questions, even though I'm not an attorney, I can answer them right without giving legal advice, obviously. But he was like, yeah, that guy Greg was just a fast fucking talker from New York. And I'm like, I get it. I can work on it. But like, that's who I am. Like, it's hard for me to change my personality. Like, I don't
even see you as that fast of a talker, to be honest. But I
know this guy was like a snail, I guess, but yeah. I'll tell you what, actually, let me share. This is actually a reality in this business. This is a side note, but I really think the listeners will get value from this. This just happened like 2 weeks ago. We got a good lead because we also buy in Delaware, right? That's the state where my acquisitions guy lives. So it makes sense to buy there too. We got a lead, smoking hot motivated, bunch of competition. He goes on the appointment, builds amazing rapport, separates himself from everyone else. They take the offer. So and Chris Voss says this, yes is nothing without how. We get the offer accepted. Now the guy's got legal questions. So then he calls the de facto attorney, just kidding, Greg. And I'm going through the document with this guy to complete the agreement, not sign the contract, little nugget there. And we're going through the thing line by line. And at the end, I could have had him sign and I could have called him the next day and said, I need lockbox access. However, I don't think that's the right thing to do. So I told him, I said, listen, because the property's vacant and you want to close in 3 weeks, we're going to need to have reasonable access via a lockbox in order to get our contractors in there, to get the right bids, to get the right jobs. So the day we close, the guy's there with the dumpster and we're getting this thing cleaned out. He went AWOL. He was like, lockbox. He made it seem like I was from Al-Qaeda. And I'm like, I get why you're upset. I'm so sorry. This is our process. And I had to get Brett on the phone because I didn't know how to deal with the guy because like he didn't know me. I was like the big bad bank, and Brett's the guy, his best friend. So we get Brett on the phone. He's talking to the seller. We had to actually end the call. We had to say, listen, we got to talk amongst ourselves and get back to you. So we almost like the seller does for you, right? But it was reversed. And I told Brett, I said, listen, dude, if this guy's not willing to put and this was a pretty good deal too, but it wasn't a good enough deal to where I would take it sight unseen. I said, in order for us to move forward, I need access to this property or else we can't do what we need to do for this house. Because we were trying to wholesale it or maybe rehab it ourselves, but we needed contractors to go in there no matter what. I said, I think the guy's still going to take our offer because he really likes you. But if he's not willing to at least mail you the key and have you have the key to go over there strategically, maybe 3 times a week to show contractors and buyers the property, we got to walk away because then it's just going to be a big waste of time and he's going to have the wrong expectations. He ultimately sold to a competitor of ours, and that was fine. We knew that was going to be an outcome. But the key here is we were willing to walk away from that deal that probably would have made us 30 grand because we're not going to compromise our systems and our processes and the way that we do business. And the lesson here is that when you're brand new, it's hard to do that because you need the money and you want the money. And I get it. I've been there. But once you get some establishment and you have enough deals and revenue coming in, you need to be able to walk away from deals that aren't going to meet your criteria. And you need to be able to walk away from sellers who have the wrong expectations because the deal will fall apart when you're in escrow. I'm telling you right now, it will. So you need to be willing to not compromise your values, your systems, and your procedures. So that was a lesson that probably cost me 30 grand. The lead cost me $300. But the point is, once you get enough leads, I guess maybe we could transition to that, you can set yourself up to where you have options, right? And you don't need to buy every house, right? You don't need to do that. You can buy the houses that make sense and you can walk away from the deals that don't make sense. Or you can walk away from the deals where the sellers are going to be unreasonable because it's probably going to blow up anyway. It's a big deal. It's a big deal. Yeah. Nobody likes to talk about that either.
No, and the harder it is in the front end, it's going to be harder later. And the only thing you could do different, which I can Monday morning quarterback anything, and you already know, sometimes you got to bring that stuff up early and often. And like I teach my acquisition guys, like from like the first second we get serious, let them know that we're going to have a lockbox on here because it's our asset now. Even though we don't own it, we're going to watch the pipes. We're going to watch any thievery. I don't work just in the city of Detroit. I'm working in suburbs where there's $300,000-$500,000 homes. But if they don't bring that up right away, it's just like selling the add-ons, right? You want to sell the undercoating on the Trans Am or whatever. You better tell them before they even get in the car. If you don't get the undercoating, I don't think this thing's even going to drive off the lot. That's when you got to turn into a New York salesman.
We should have done that. That was a mistake we made, actually.
Yeah. And you don't know if he might have said no right out of the gate because some of those guys are weird. We have a lot of engineers in Metro Detroit, right? And they're very nitpicky about things. And I'm just like, I don't need you. If you want to do business, that's cool. Find somebody else. They try to do business with somebody else. They underpromise, overpromise, underdeliver. It never happens. And you're totally right. So that's great advice for the listeners and watchers. Greg has negotiated, whether it was positively or negatively, thousands of contracts, right? And hundreds of them have closed. And you've helped a lot of people for free. I'm sure if I texted you and was like, hey, I'm in this situation, you might not take 4 hours on it, but you're like, record something and go try this because you just never know. And sometimes it's like a chessboard, or I talk about like playing pool. You got to look at things from different angles, like billiard pool, right? And you never know what you're going to see if you walk around the other side of the table. And real sales, the art of real sales for the most part is kind of lost. We know that because of the digital age, but if you can talk to people, you got a lot better chance of doing business.
Oh, 100%, man. 100%. And it's all about just being in a situation where you don't you want to buy the house, but you don't need to buy the house. And that was my big rub when I first started is I knew that the system, and I worked with John and he taught me all the right things to say, but I still had a needy mindset and I still needed to get the deal, right? And it would screw up my process. So once I started realizing that the deals will come, because we're doing enough marketing and this, that, and the other, I started approaching every deal where like, listen, I want this to work out, but if it doesn't work out, I'm willing to walk away. And that allowed me to before I hired somebody, like really like sell the right way, right? And go through the process the way it needs to be done versus trying to like force things, right? And like force sellers to do business with you. And it just never works out, But yeah, I mean, it's important. I think it's if you're listening and you're brand new, it might be hard to relate. But once you have some experience and you stick around this business long enough, you go back and listen to this again, you're like, oh, that's so true, man. Oh my gosh, that's like man, I've had that happen so many times, and it never works out when the seller's not 100% on board.
Yeah, and Greg's dropping tons of wisdom in this podcast, in this episode, so you guys can listen to this for the next decade. Sales never changes. It really
Try to make
doesn't.
it evergreen, right? You know,
Absolutely. And there's two things. We're coming close to the end, but not yet. But I want to bring up two things before I forget, Greg. So number one,
sure.
You're kind of famous for your book reviews, right? So if
I
you guys
am. That is
following,
that is. I will give myself credit. That has definitely gotten me some notoriety on the internet.
No, for sure it has. So if you guys aren't following Greg, we'll have all the links in the bottom of the show notes and all that. Don't worry about that now, but make sure that you pay attention to his book reviews because he's so crazy about books. He'll review them maybe sometimes 3 and 4 times. I'm like, this guy's talked about this book 5 times, but it's because you fall in love with those books and they literally can change our lives. So why don't you give us like a minute or two, like your short list of like must read books. I don't care if people are new or if they've been in the business 100 years. What are your must read books?
So you got to read The Compound Effect. You need to read Principles. So Compound Effect, Darren Hardy. Principles, Ray Dalio. You should read Rich Dad Poor Dad, even though there's no tactical instruction there. It's a mindset book, but that's a good book to kind of shift your paradigm about money. You need to read Think and Grow Rich at least once. That's a tough book to read, but it's really good. You need to read a sales book called Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. Those are my staple books that you need to read. If you want to read those, you got to read those. If you have some more kind of like, if you want to learn more real estate stuff, there's a book called The Millionaire Real Estate Investor by Gary Keller. Phenomenal book. There's another book by Gary Keller called The One Thing that really teaches you about focus and how to find the one thing that matters and the one thing that by doing it, everything else is easier or unnecessary. It's really a book about leverage. There's another marketing book that is really good called 80-20 Sales and Marketing. A guy named Perry Marshall wrote that book, and he really talks about how to think about marketing and sales in a strategic way to be efficient and effective. And I've read that book probably 10 times, Dylan. And
he's a Dan Kennedy student. You know that.
Perry Marshall, oh, yeah. Oh, you just dropped the D word. So you
the
got
Godfather, baby.
You got to be reading No BS Direct Marketing, Dan Kennedy, No BS Wealth Attraction, Dan Kennedy, Magnetic Marketing, Dan Kennedy. Oh, Dan
Ultimate
Kennedy.
Sales Letter. You can go on and on.
Sales Letter. What's the one I love? It's called No BS Time Management for Entrepreneurs.
Oh, yeah, the Time Vampires.
Oh,
when I read that, I was like, I can't believe I let all these people from a meetup group call me. This is like 100 years ago. I was like,
I'm tough to get a hold of. Not like a dick, but I'm like, if someone's hitting me up, like right now, my phone's on Do Not Disturb. I'm just looking at it. I got 5 missed calls since we did our show.
I live on Do Not Disturb.
Yeah, I got a bunch of text messages I haven't answered. Not because I'm a jerk, but it's like I'll answer them in the order of importance, right? It's like I owe nobody a response unless they're a paid client and they're paying me like serious cheddar. Not because I'm a jerk, but it's like you have to look at your time as an entrepreneur like it is the ultimate commodity. You can't get time back, especially on a 24-hour day. So, I look at my messages, Dylan, like just to go on a time management rant, like, dude, like I'm looking at the messages now. One of them I can answer whenever. The other one has zero urgency. The other one, pretty much no urgency. Another like all these messages, like I'm going to get back to these guys later on because there's no need. If the escrow officer says, "Hey, Greg, we got a problem with title. You got to give me a call." I'm
calling them first. Otherwise, you do it from the hot tub. Greg is also famous for his hot tub lives on Instagram and other silly things.
Yes, that's true. With the glorified chest hair that I just shaved. I had some.
Yeah, there you go.
Chest flow going. But you got to understand time, man. And that's another thing that I don't think people really. It's tough, and it was tough for me, and still is not easy. But understanding how to protect your time and not have your whole day go by with stupid crap that doesn't move the needle.
Yeah. A book you can add, I'm sure you've read, or you certainly know, is Shift by Gary Keller.
I've never read that. I should check it out.
Yeah, if you read it, you're like, it's exactly close to what's happening right now, and minus the foreclosures. But it's the mindset, which I don't know if you're going to get a lot from it, but it helps me like impart wisdom to the newer or younger people in the business who I deal with, or I got to check
that book out. Now you got me.
Super duper simple, but you're going to be like, oh, and it gives you some good ratios that if you go back and like Google them, it's like, okay, this is when it's a seller's market, this is when it's a buyer's market, and it kind of helps us to sound more intelligent, speaking with private lenders or like talking more about real business, not necessarily just podcasts and info marketing and all that other stuff. But it's pretty good, super simple. But again, like principled, you know what I mean? So I like that one. And your buddy Chris Voss just brought out another book for real estate agents too, which I read in like 2 days.
Right now, it's so good. The favorite of the fool. The chapter.
Man, I'm so annoyed. I'm like, I never buy physical books anymore, not in person, anyways. And I'm like trying to order it, and I'm like, so yesterday, I'm like, let me buy the thing on Kindle.
That's
I
what I got.
It on my iPad, right?
Right here.
I read it on my iPad app, but I read the whole thing, and I was like, this is pretty strong. I mean, it's all tactical empathy. Yeah.
They're really good book. He's got another one coming out, I think next year, like official negotiation, like Black Swan Limited book.
Yeah.
Anything Chris Voss puts out, you got to consume. That guy I actually met him. I've had him on my podcast. He's a nice guy. I've hung out with him. He's a super chill guy, very humble, not a jerk, and practices what he preaches. He's a real cool dude, Chris.
And he's got game, Mr. Voss. If you're watching, we all know. I see it. We see what's going on in your IG. So, so Greg, that brings us to your podcast. So Greg's been running a podcast that I was an early guest on, and it was called Pave the Way. But recently we've had a switch, right? So you changed the name from Pave the Way to the Real Estate Investing Fast Track. You've had some phenomenal guests. Why don't you talk a little bit about your podcast and like why you do it?
So I was drunk in Hawaii and really drunk, actually. I had probably 7 or 8 Mai Tais trying to pick up chicks. Full transparency here. That didn't work out, but I was talking with my friend Devin, and I'm an open, what you see on this podcast is what I am. Like, I'm very just straight up, like I'm very blunt. So that was going on in Hawaii, and I was talking to my friend Devin, who actually went to the real estate seminar with me. And at the time we were doing all right. And I said, man, we know a lot of stuff that we've learned just by osmosis. And I want to share it. I feel like people my age could benefit from this. And I want to start a show. And when I got back from Hawaii, I was like, I'm going to start hitting my friends up. At that time, I built a respectable network. And I said, why don't we record a podcast? And I'm going to start putting them out once I get like 10 or 15 podcasts recorded. So I started recording shows. Didn't know what the name was going to be. And then I said, well, I'm maybe paving the way for younger people to have success. So I named the show Pave the Way Podcast. I thought it was a decent name, but once we started getting marketing consultants involved and stuff, the message to market match was a little janky. So I said, this podcast consultant was like, dude, you should rename this like a real estate show, because you're basically making real estate content. And I said, that's a good idea. So me and my assistant brainstormed, and we came up with the Real Estate Investing Fast Track, just as a catchy name to rename our show, right? So it's all the same content, formerly known, AKA, whatever you want to call Pave the Way Podcast. But that podcast is my version of trying to give back, right? In a free way, where I interview people like you and other successful investors who I know, and other entrepreneurs who might be, high level. And I ask them, what did they do to get to where they're at? How have they had success? What have they done? What are they doing in their real estate business? How do you negotiate well? How do you communicate better? Like, I try to really crack the code and give people really what they need to hear in order to have success. And, since then we've done some trainings and whatnot, but it's really just always been a way to selfishly interview people who I might want to speak to, who I might not have the opportunity to speak to unless I had a podcast. And, like I say, unless you're putting out like controversial crap like Andrew Tate and some of these knuckleheads, like a podcast is only going to do good, right? If you're generally putting out like content that's not going to like edge people, that's not my thing. You're only going to benefit from a podcast. It's not going to have any downside, right? Unless you're talking about crazy shit, which we don't talk about. So I've found that it's opened up a lot of doors. It's been able to give me some credibility, beyond the real estate stuff, because like when you have a podcast, even though anyone can make a podcast, it's a level of social proof and credibility that consumers see. And if you're just Rick Jones without a podcast, you can still be successful. But if you're Rick Jones with a platform, it gives you some added credibility and it gives you some leverage. So I've really enjoyed it, Dylan, and I'm going to continue to do it,
Yeah, there's a lot of psychological proof, and I can't go into all the science because I'm not that smart, but there's something about, like when we hear somebody speak, it's different than just watching them. And
yes,
of course, belly to belly is the ultimate, but in today's fast-paced world, like if you're driving your Tesla down the PCH or whatever you guys do in California, and you're listening to Dylan every single week on Monday at 8 a.m. and you're like, man, this guy Dylan, he's dropping bombs. I love this podcast. When we do meet at an event, you're like, man, I listen to your podcast.
It's a celebrity. You have a celebrity effect.
Yeah, like so I'm true, like, bro. Greg, wait a minute. You're doing deals in 9 states. I just do a podcast. Yeah, but you're like, man, remember when you said this? And it's like that stuff happens and people really love it. You and I have met some, I don't know how famous in real life. I don't hang out with Muhammad Ali or whatever, but we've met in our business some of the more famous people, right? And when you give them a compliment like that, they're like, Wow, you actually listen? Because most people are like, hey, Greg, I got a deal for you. Hey, could you come and do this? Could you do this for me? Can you do that for me? Instead, they're just like, hey, man, I appreciate this. This was cool. And they look at me and like guys like Adrian and guys like Trevor and even Handbright and John, like when I first met them, I would compliment them, but it was honest. And I was like, hey, I heard you say this, or I watched this or read this thing that you wrote. And they're just like, oh, really? Where everybody else is kind of either too shy or they're trying to like work them to, to have them pitch.
They have an angle. They have some sort of a scheme.
Yeah. It's interesting. I'm not an. You want to hear a
funny podcast story? You want to hear a funny?
Yeah, for sure.
Story? This is a good one. I was in Florida last summer. Might have been partying, but who knows? And I was at this bar watching a hockey game, and I was going to the bathroom, and this guy came up to me and was like, "Hey, are you Greg Helbeck?" And I like turned around and I'm like, "Yes." And he's like, "I watched your YouTube video with this other guy. That's crazy. I'm meeting you in person." And I'm like a knucklehead, like no name. And he's like, "This is insane. I can't believe I'm meeting you here at this bar." And I'm like, "Yeah, man, like nice to meet you. How you doing?" And it was like
his hand without washing.
It was super weird. Yeah. And I was like, "All right, man, I'm going to go take a leak, and, and it was just like, it opened my eyes up. I'm like, the point of that is you never know who's watching. And ironically, at that same bar, like 20 minutes later, I was hanging out with all these people. And this guy was like, "Oh yeah, my dad lends money to this guy in Long Island." And I'm like, who is that guy? And he's like, "Oh, so-and-so." I go, "So-and-so is one of my best friends." And I'm texting him a picture. I'm like, "Dude, I'm with this guy." He's like, "Holy crap, that's crazy." So you never know who's out there, right?
Yeah.
And it's a small world. Even though there's a lot of people in America, it's a small world, right? It's a small circle. Got to do the right thing. You got to be congruent and transparent. Like, cause some people I've met who I saw online, and then I met them in person, and like I thought they were affiliated with Al Qaeda. I'm like, oh my God, this person's a total jerk. And it's like, you got to be congruent, you got to be consistent, and it comes off. Like when people see that you are on the internet and you're the same in person, it adds to that credibility because people know you're genuine. You have key here, you have good intentions. You're not a jerk. That's really important, especially if you're an internet guy.
Yeah, there's nothing better for me than when I do go to an event and somebody's like, "Hey, I met this guy from Metro Detroit, blah, blah, blah." And he was telling me he knows you. And you know what I mean? Like, and it's all positive stuff. And I'm like, because our business is so small. I tell these stories. Like if Greg was hosing his private lenders, which he would never do, I would know about it within days, right? Within days, because it just sweeps across. Seriously, it sweeps across the nation.
It's like the COVID virus, dude. It just goes global.
Oh, it does. And I was just at $1 Million meeting and like, and you were there, right, Greg, at Million? I think you were there, right? Or no. So you were there the next, anyways. So I'm at $1 Million meeting and this guy's like, "Oh, you're from Detroit?" I'm like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Do you know this guy and this guy?" I'm like, "Yeah." And he's like, "I'm suing him." I'm like, "Cool." I'm like, "Good to know." I'm like, "Hey," I'm like, "Want to have a beer?"
Like, I'm suing him
because bad news travels fast. So like, again, the whole, be hanging out at masterminds with people who are positive, guys like Greg, maybe myself, I'll pat myself on the back, but like, this is what changes that mindset for regular people. And they get into our world and they're like, Greg's bought more houses than I dare say, than his whole family combined. Right. And he doesn't care. He's not bragging about it, but it's like when he was 15, that wasn't even a thought, probably. Pretty soon, like these YouTube kids are going to be flipping houses at 10 in their parents' names. But in all reality, like that's what mindset can do for you. And like, I know, Greg, like down deep, I don't know if you're a mindset guy, but in my head, like you're a mindset guy. You're not like a wholesale guy, a house flipper or whatever. Like you're a mindset guy because you can do anything. I mean, like we know that, right? So it might not be in real estate 5 years from now. Like Matt Andrews says, real estate might not be the thing. It might be the thing that gets you to the thing. So,
I've heard that. Yeah,
absolutely. So my last question for you, bro. Oh, 100%. So my last question for you today is, if there's anything that the Flip Nerd podcast audience can do for Greg Helbeck, what would it be?
Check out my show, Real Estate Investing Fast Track. Follow me on Instagram at Grego_37. And if you want a free freebie on like the top 5 direct mail mistakes I have made, which cost me a lot of money, that's an understatement, go to directmailclass.com and I'll give you my free guide on the top 5 fatal direct mail mistakes I have made that you don't have to make, so you can be more successful if you want to do direct mail marketing.
Beautiful, man. We'll have links to all that stuff in the show. If you guys, whether you're listening or watching, if you go to flipnerd.com and go to the shows, you can scroll down on this episode, go into the show notes. We take all the notes so you don't have to, and all that information will be down there. You guys will be able to find Greg. You guys can learn about me. You can subscribe to the show, and we would love for you to do that. So Greg, you have any last words?
I think my last words for your audience would be, you got to commit to this business. And if you commit to this business and you're in it for the long haul and you know it's going to be hard, but you're accepting that and you're willing to go through the gauntlet, it can change your life. Simple as that.
Man, Greg, we appreciate you having on the show. And this is Dylan Tanaka for Real Estate Investing Secrets. We'll see you on the next show.
Thanks for listening to today's show. There are 3 ways I can help you start or grow your real estate investing business. If you're a new investor and just getting started, the Flip Nerd Investor Coaching Program is the most effective program in America. I've been coaching and mentoring new real estate investors for 10 years, and my students have literally purchased thousands and thousands of properties. Many of them started with little to no experience at all. Our program is a paint-by-numbers program where we tell you exactly what to do week by week to make sure that you don't get distracted on your way to results. We show you how to build a real business, not just create another job for yourself. New memberships are limited. You can learn more and apply or schedule a call with me and my team at flipnerd.com/coaching. If you're an experienced investor doing a minimum of 10 deals a year, up to 500 deals a year or more, or have a multi-million-dollar real estate portfolio already, you should check out our powerful Investor Fuel Real Estate Investor Mastermind. Over 100 of the nation's leading real estate investors are members, and it's not uncommon for our members to 2 to 5x their business just from getting around other members at Investor Fuel. At Investor Fuel, each of us are business advisors to one another's businesses, but we don't stop at business. We focus heavily on becoming better people and living fuller lives. If you're looking for fuel for your business or fuel for your life, please check out investorfuel.com. Applications and interviews are required, as most investors are not a fit for our community. Please learn more at investorfuel.com. If you're not ready for coaching or masterminds but eager to start learning more about investing, please join our private Facebook group by visiting flipnerd.com/Facebook. New members get access to free training from us right here at flipnerd.com, and it's a community to safely ask your questions, a great place to get started. Simply go to flipnerd.com/Facebook to request your access today.